podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I very much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother Justice Rajee.
Man, what's happening?
You know, old black man talk. Same old, same old.
Same old. Same soup reheated.
You know what, man? I want to say real quick, man. I've been talking to some, like, you know, when you spend time talking to like old black men, you remember, like, there's this language that like populated black people's language from, like, I don't know, time immemorial, but definitely until like the 70s or something. Mm-hmm. Right? And then, like, you know, they dig it, man. You know, he came over in his own nickel, man. Like, you know what I mean? That was cold-blooded, you know. And, you know, if you came up a certain time, you a certain age, you just know what all that stuff means, right? Like, you gleaned what all of it means. And I think in today's time, it is my estimation that we are perilously close to losing that language. Like, you know how like certain languages from indigenous tribes and stuff, like people are like, man, nobody knows how to say it no more. Right, they just stop talking it. I feel like that, like, you know, black talk, like jive talk. We gotta preserve this stuff, man. You know what I mean? Because, you know, when somebody came, he was like, man, there's an old head, esteemed older brother from this area. He was talking to me and somebody else. And he was like, dig this, man. Cat came all the way from Amsterdam on his own nickel. And I realized how, like, I don't know if in 20 years a kid will understand what that meant. Like, you know what I mean? Like it just really can get lost, right? Like just the hip talk, as my man they say on the Teddy Pendergrass on the album. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I'm sorry, baby, you ain't down with the hip talk. So I say, man, we got to do our job to keep the hip talk alive, man. We can't let all the new slang get rid of the hip talk, man.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's also the patterning, because even if you didn't know the word, if you are schooled in it, so to speak, you go like, okay, all right, nickel's money. All right, he paid his own way. Like, you put it together. Like, even if you haven't heard that exact phrasery, you can still put it together. And I always think it's important that you at least you are in tune at the level that you can put it together, even if it's, you know, got some regional styling in there, right? Some terms you don't know. You're like, okay, all right, I see. I'm picking up what you're laying down. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of stuff.
No, absolutely. And I mean, to your point, and yeah, I think we've talked about this, and I think about this a lot. You know, there were a couple things, like when you look at Black communities before, to me, the globalization of hip hop, you had true regional dialects. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I mean, truly, like you know, like you would go to a town and not know what someone's talking about. It would be a word that would be predominant and everyone else would be trying to figure it out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, obviously the omnipresent John from the Delaware Valley area, right? Like, and then its variation Joan from the DC area, or how to call everybody Joe, like, or Mo, or how you can sometimes barely understand if someone's saying two in Baltimore, right? Like, you know, like, and up and around the country, you had these regional dialects. And I think hip hop on some level helped, because it helped people understand people from other regions and, you know, that kind of thing. That got rid of, like, especially the northern United States was in some way better than the rest of the country. But I think the other challenge is many of those levels of regional dialects have been just morphed into each other in the music. So as far as now you hear all these other words from other from other areas that then come into the language that then populate it to the point where you don't even know if that particular town still has those kind of quote unquote regional dialects, right? Regional ways of communication, which I just think, it becomes important for the uniqueness of a community that you acknowledge that, while part of the Black diaspora in America, the brown diaspora, like they have their own particular forms of communication and everything that comes with it.
Yeah. And I mean, you think about, like, these are, because I don't know, I feel like it's a Delaware Valley, Philadelphia up, like, concept by Aki. You know what I'm saying? Like, what up, Ak? Like, you hear people say that. Like, I don't know nowhere else in America. And I don't know if a person's of a certain age in a certain space, they may never hear nobody ever say that again. Like, it excitingly seeing, I mean, like, I mean, I still, I break out of family. You know what I'm saying? Other places might say fam, right? You know what I'm saying? What up, family? You know what I'm saying? What fam? That sort of thing. So but all of those, the various ways you can speak to and speak of folks, and as it is, especially with John, like, yeah, it's like I be here, oh, it's a John. I'm like, nah, you don't say it like you say it like you read it out of English book. Don't you probably shouldn't say it.
Funny, because it wasn't written.
You gotta leave that alone,
man. I never seen the word John written down until 1994. I had never seen it. I had never wrote it down. It's like wrote down the Blue John. You said the Blue John or boy, it's certain stuff again that like you just took for granted was kind of like spoken language. And that, again, to your point, all these things have to do also with the cultural context of a region, and where the term Aki would have been such connected with like Islam as a religion, Orthodox Islam in Philadelphia, and the varying kind of the culture of that, which has been well documented. But I mean, those things are important, and we have to keep those kind of ways, just as we talk about like food ways in the Black community, right? And we talk about the importance of keeping like the food ways and acknowledging the origin stories and where food comes from and what people are doing to produce it. Language is going to be the same thing, because as hip hop is this global concept that projects itself. What you find is that in the areas of different countries, while they take on some of the stuff, like I saw an Italian drill video. It was interesting. I sent it to you. There's an Italian drill video, right? And they are kicking it. They are kicking it, man. But everybody's a Crip. It is. Everybody got all blue. The cars are blue. The girls' bikinis are blue. I ain't never seen those shit like this before, man. But they are kicking it. They are. And it's funny because I was in London and I was talking to a younger dude. I was talking to a younger brother. It was a conversation between a dude that's older than me. He was from England, but had spent a lot of time in the States. And then a younger brother who had not spent time in the States. He was a Syrian brother, and but he had like discovered through Jay Dilla, discovered like the roots and Common. And so like for him, Jay Dilla was the gateway drug to like real hip hop and R&B, right? It was fascinating. But then he was saying that his peers were all into UK drill. And then he was telling me about Polish drill and Italian drill. And I was kind of like, looking at him, but kind of like, okay, I like to consider myself an international guy, but I ain't never heard no damn Polish drill and Italian drill. Man, I seen it. Man, that shit is hard. Man, they are driving around in cars. They are riding around. They got pit bulls, man. It is something else. But it is clearly uniquely Italian, right? And so I think one of our challenges is as hip hop is going global, it still retains a lot of very personal elements to the terrain that it stays in, right? Like,
yeah.
I was listening to a dude. He wrote a book called Tarzan Economics. Let's see if I can find it. But like, which you should definitely check this book out. But I listened to him, and he was talking about how like the top 10 like top 10 Dutch hip hop acts and streaming on Spotify, the top 7 are all Dutch rappers. Drake isn't until number 8.
Oh wow!
So it's like, even though as much as we talk about hip hop being like a global thing, it still is fundamentally in across the world. They listen to it through the lens of their music.
Yeah.
And then they take on American artists versus, I think, our assumption that they listen to the Busta Rhymes and Drake, you know what I'm saying? Like, and Drake all day. Like, they're not. They're listening to hip hop through their lenses. And so while they still are doing that, it would be a shame if we lose that and lose the art of like hearing the hip hop that is unique to the regional context of many places in the country. You know, and the name of the book, real quick, is Tarzan Economics, and it's written by Will Page. He's he's a former chief economist at Spotify. So he has really, really interesting insights on streaming and like what people are listening to, why, global disruption, and all that.
Peace. Well, that brings us right in. So
right on there.
I'm aware, and by the time I guess most folks will hear this, there'll be actually almost like a double stack, because the recording for last previous episode and this one will come out probably within 3-4 hours of each other. But fully aware of what happened in Texas, and the babies and the educators and community members that lost their lives in that circumstance, in an effort, well, one, just because we can't talk about the madness and mayhem, at least not in the first person of our society every week. What we had planned, we discussed, 2 records have come out in the last couple of weeks. One by Pusha T, the other by Kendrick Lamar. We wanted to have just some conversation about those records. But before we do that, again, I wanted to say, respect and love to all the families and into that community, and everybody else, anyone else, that living through this, going through this again, is taking you wherever it's taking you. It's all right to feel how you feel and be how you be at the moment in regards to these things. Let's just make space for each other. So, peace to that. And so I'll start with we'll start with Pusha T, but I think we might weave a little bit because the one day I was gonna say about both records are created in sort of, as I consider it, the new school, sort of as a hip hop scholar that can do this better than me, but kind of like when you would make like an album that has a theme all the way through, which, in the last decade and a half, I think has changed in hip hop, where everyone sometimes people make it is a compendium of the music I made recently, but they're not necessarily connected to each other in any way, right? Where the traditional, kind of methodology of like Low End Theory to Daily Operation, Ruth's first album, Nas' Illmatic, where there's some sort of tie in why these songs are together. These are the songs. So both of these
Life
records,
After Death, like
Life After Death, yeah, right. Like that, there's some tie in to why these songs are together, and it's not just any number of songs. But they both, put these records out, and I guess I'll start with Pusha T. Clearly Pusha T doesn't spend all his days at current in life distributing, narcotics in the street space in the gray economy. However, there's a whole suite of like what that world is, the attitudes and the way, quite frankly, as much as our society tries to sort of delegitimize the reality that, selling of things that are illegal in our society is much built into the economy as not doing that. It's just more disfavorable to, speak about it. And I fully understand also that, the harm that, those who are addicted to the substances and the family, just, all the stuff that happens with it. So absolutely. All that notwithstanding, right?
Absolutely.
The reality of like what that is what it is to move in that world, but also, you know, as Pusha T is I think, you know, he's a world class. I do this better than you do this. Almost like whatever it is, like what you thought you was dope, but I was doper than you was dope. You know what I'm saying? Like you think you fresh, like that energy that comes out of you know, not just, I wouldn't say it's just a street dynamic, so to speak, but is a social dynamic. You know what I mean? Status, position,
And a hip
positionality.
hop. I
Hip hop
think to
dynamic.
your point, it's a variation of a hip hop dynamic, right? That has been at play for a long time, right? Whether it's the idea of the best rapper or the flyest person or what you had on or your OJ, your car, right? Like it's been present in the culture of hip hop, whether the Harlem form or the Bronx form, right? Like in their origin stories for some time.
Yeah. So let's, I mean, I don't know, let's just enter it. What's some of your first thoughts? Maybe we'll start with the Pusha T on, and then we can.
So one of the things we built about this is like, I look at them, to your point, I think you said it really well, is they're both themed albums in a time where someone drops a song and the song blows up, and then they go make other songs. And then they put those songs out. They find the other artist who's really well known today, and then they put the song out, right? Put the album out. And people, because of the streaming structure, take from what they want, right? So it's like you don't really listen to it as a theme because the album was put together for individual pieces, like a buffet, right? Like, so it's like, okay, what are the 10 favorite dishes that you like in this particular area? And they're out there, and you take 4 of number one piece of number 2, right? And you just kind of go from there. Both of these albums have been constructed to be digested in a whole form, right? Which I think lends itself to talking about the age of both of the artists, the amount of time both of artists have been in the industry. It's kind of, we can forget that Kendrick has been around doing albums for about 13 years now.
Yeah.
Right. And again, because he was younger and, you know, he got so popular in such a small amount of time, we can forget of how long he's been around and doing writing and all that kind of stuff. And to say nothing of Pusha T been in, you know, for 20 some odd years, right? Or 20 years. So they're making music as mature people, which I think is important. So even though you may listen to Push and it's like, okay, we keep talking about how much drugs he can sell. Well, he's doing it from a seasoned artist perspective. And it is performance art. It is like there are some levels of absurdity to it, and that's part of the thing, right? Like he compares himself to the Scorsese in a sense of like, I make a thing. You know the thing I'm coming with. You don't ask me to do the other thing because you don't ask anyone else to do the other thing, right? Right. Like you don't, like you don't ask Wes Anderson to make Wes Anderson movies, right? Like, you know what movie you're going to get if Wes Anderson makes a movie. Like someone's not going to talk to, like, you know what I mean? It's going to be something.
Right. It's going to be something quirky
strange
in there. It's going to be
I'm a
some
Wes
angles.
Anderson fan. Like, listen, I'm a Wes Anderson fan, but you know what you're going to get when you go. You know, your popcorn probably needs to be gourmet because it can't just be regular. It's going to be some strange shit going on in the Wes Anderson movie. So I think he positions himself as that. I think he has kept himself relevant while, having a very kind of classic flair, but at the same time kept himself relevant. I also think it's interesting that you get an artist that's 44 years old, basically almost 50 years old, that does an album with 2 of the, if you don't say top 5, you definitely have to put them in top 10 accomplished producers in hip hop, and frankly, is getting close to black music in the last 30, 40 years, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And producing an entire project that is cohesive in the parts they created and in the whole, which is unique. Like, it's one thing, like when, starting with, I think Illmatic was the first place where you started to see like somebody went and got a beat from everybody. Right? Like that was where, okay, Large Professor did a couple, LES did a couple, Pete Rock did a couple, Primo did a couple, right? And again, they were like the sum total, they were a great album, but they were the sum total. Where these were created to make sense of the batch that were done with that particular producer and make sense in the collective.
Yeah.
I also think Pusha T does music that is really relevant to a segment of the population that larger segments would like to think they're a part of. Right? So it's kind of like, like you would like to think you're a part of the segment of the people he's talking to, even though the people he's talking to are a relative small group of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if he's talking about certain bad, because to your point, he talks about stuff that generally speaking, the general public doesn't know about.
Right.
Right. Like he talks about restaurants that like people don't know about. You know what I mean? Like you don't know about them because it's some shit that you got to have a fair amount of money or a fair amount of access to know about. And he delights in talking about it, but you would like to think you know about it because you would like to think, you know what I mean?
Like,
just like everyone.
Like,
Everyone
what's the
wants
name?
they have a protect. Like, you know what I mean? They like, you don't have no protect. What are you talking about? You don't have one at all. Like, you're not willing to spend the money to do it. Like, and if you have a particular watch, you put a whole bunch of gaudy shit on it to make it look famous for people who don't matter in 10 years. There has no resale value. And he makes fun of you for doing that, right? So it's like, it's interesting in art in that sense, right? Like it's art that pretends itself to speak to a very specific crowd, and then the rest of the crowd then kind of gets into it. It is very similar to how you talked about Big, right? Like that whole like I know why I like it, why do you like it?
Yeah, right. It's I mean, and I was looking through some of the songs. I'm trying to remember. I mean, I guess you probably can imagine the songs I like. Well, two things I did structure because I usually, especially if it's like a whole album that at least is constructed as an album, I try to find a way to listen to it like all the way through, right, while doing something. So if that's driving or cleaning something, so I can hear all the songs, then listen them all again, and then start to put the names to the song so I remember what the name of the song is and what was on that song. So so I was like, Call My Bluff. I imagine you would think that would be a song that I would particularly care for. We can happen. This can happen right now. That's what we're doing.
It absolutely sounds like a song for you. It sounds like your kind of thing. Like I'm waiting for you to call my bluff.
You know what I'm saying, like, what's up with it then? And what's the word? I was trying to piece together, which I can't remember for sure. It was one where he's Open Air was pretty interesting too. It's actually, I mean, the album only goes, it's like 35 minutes, which is sort of surprising. I don't know how long records actually are anymore. Like albums, like it's hard to have no barometer.
They're deluxe. They're 21 songs because they add on these other songs again for like they create the. It's similar to when like Big and Wu-Tang and everybody did the double albums, right? Like when they recognized you could sell two albums at one, right? Like they got 2 units for one album being sold.
Mm-hmm.
It's the streaming is like put as many songs on there because it really doesn't matter because they're going to be streamed. So It's about putting every song on there. So like you don't know how long the album is because they put remixes and deluxe stuff on there for other artists so you could get more streams so you can make more money, right? So you don't really know how long it is anymore.
Yeah, but like the number, and it's I mean, even in the titles on the songs, like because it speaks to like if you've never been in a neighborhood, like if you've never actually been in a neighborhood where the full composition of what's happening in that neighborhood, you got majority regular working people that work somewhere. And their family, this is their block, their neighborhood, their part of town, whatever have you, and they just live there. Then you got, some other people come through, and then you may have, you have your local, your food places, whether that be prepared food or, corner stores. And then, you may have your neighborhood, distribution of, substances somewhere within a proximity. There's like a car wash next to a garage, somebody's car always getting waxed or something. You know what I'm saying? This dude that's, it's like all of these dynamics that I'm like, to many of us, and I think, and I know that some of the structural things are different, other parts of the country, but like you kind of know the sign of it when you see it. You're like, oh, okay, we down the way. All right, this is, all right, they over there, there go that dude. There's the guy that's doing that. And somebody, at least in the open air era, somebody's outside.
That's
right. You know what I mean? And usually it'll be a like you can almost either by the traffic or by the movement, kind of like that street is the street where the stuff is actually happening. This is like the off street that monitors that street.
Right.
Like it's not like this street is where they hanging out. That street is where the stuff is going
transactions are taking place.
Right. And I think something we had spoke about offline from this, but just like if you understand it, and not saying that it should be normal, but you understand how to navigate through it. You understand how to like simultaneously walk through that space if you're not necessarily involved and get where you're going, kind of send a message that, hey man, y'all do y'all thing. You know what I mean? Now, if you're from that neighborhood, maybe you know that's somebody that's the kids that was older when you was little, or you from there, they know you, right? They're like, oh, what's his name? If you have some level of esteem or respect amongst that thing, or whatever the dynamics are, it's not foreign to you. And whether it's good or bad, you have a sense of like, I understand what's happening here, right? Like, cool, like, and then, funny stuff happens and somebody get in a fight or someone, somebody telling jokes about some things, or, what I mean? Somebody come through in a car with super duper loud stereo. Like, and if that was your youth, which for Pusha T, it is, I can understand like the fond remembrance of that time, because it's something that I've even in my prior professional working, with youth involved, youth and young people and families, involved with the criminal justice system and various things, is trying to elevate. Like, folks are not sometimes out there involved in this stuff because they're deviants or something, like which is the way we try to frame criminality, in our society. Like, oh, there's something, there's like a defect with your sense of being. In some situations, yes, but in a lot of situations, folks have made decisions based on their circumstances and what they thought they needed to do. And there's also an aspect of when somebody's outside, so to speak, in the fullest sense, involved in the gray economy, they have a level of independence and agency that they have to sacrifice when they exit that world. And and it's a very, very like when you understand that, the whole kind of calculus of like, how could you do this? And it's like, well, part of it is they, and there's many different artists that have put it in their songs where they have said like, I didn't want to be a victim, so I make other people the victim. Like, or I will not be, I will not be the one that's going to be out here struggling if I got to take it, from somebody else. Again, not saying that's right. It's saying, but it's understanding what it is. You know what I'm saying? And then, so if you survived your circumstances by, being a part of that world and everything else that comes with it, then like the status stuff and the only people that made certain kind of money was at the, much as like, how you say, I remember being in high school, you hear about like the tunnel and Latin Quarter. You hear about these places where hip hop was happening and the rappers was going. Right. I ain't never been in them places. I was high school. I ain't never been there. Now, maybe,
or down Delaware Avenue. Back in the day when you turned Power 99, it was down Delaware Avenue.
Oh, wait. Oh, God. By the time we get through this interview, I'm sure one of them clubs, because it would be a couple of us named at the Delaware Avenue. And they'd be like, oh, man, it's going down this weekend. I'm like, I ain't going to that. I have no idea. Right? I don't even know how to get into that. I don't have no money. I'm not plugged into that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I might know a person that knows about that, right? Like, but that is, so when I listen to this record, you'll be one of the energy of some of the songs is sort of, going through what that aspect is like, you know what I'm saying? What the terms of this space, you know what I'm saying? Where, who you are is, there is a level of like, yeah, you're not at the space where you would know how to eat, go to this restaurant. Cause you do be naming restaurants that be like, I'd be like, oh, must be a fancy restaurant. I'm not down with it, but must be nice. You know what I'm saying? Like, talk, cars and all that stuff. And then I guess it's also maybe emblematic of sort of just the nature of something that definitely, I think an out and out, manifestation of sort of capitalist society that like there's no limit to where one can go within like the context of like how much money can we spend on something that's expensive, right? You know what I'm saying? And if that's the gauge for like, where you're at, right? Like, like, oh man, he got, not only did he have a watch, he has a watch we couldn't even name that thing. You know what I mean? What he said, the last time, but the only time you see me in a Breitling. I can't remember what song was it. I'll find it.
No, it was on Neck and Wrist. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's just like, man, get out of here with that. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, damn, cold world, man. Somebody like, man, yeah, it's got this chain. Like, man, you got that old, man, you got that Dookie gold from down.
I mean, it's aspiration, and again, it goes to the, obviously, in like you said, a hyper capitalist society, what passes as aspiration changes from place to place, right? Like some places it's just like, it's clear when you listen to him, what passes for aspiration is basically exclusivity, right? Like at one point there was I would say, and some rappers are still about mass market aspiration. Like I'm telling you about something that you know about, right? I just have more of it than you. His is, I'm telling you about something that you don't know about.
Yeah.
And the fact that you don't know about it is why I'm telling you about it, right? So, to use you talk about my taste levels on ace level, right? Like, so I think it's a unique form of art that is being produced by a almost 50-year-old man, right? Like a man in his mid 40s for a lot of listeners, but like really a certain group of listeners that then kind of he's been able to broaden because of the quality of the music. One quick thing I think about is really interesting with the album. I mean, besides the sonics and like a combination of Pharrell pushing him to be like super in character, and this connects to what we talked about last week with Big, like how Big on Life After Death was in character. You know what I mean? Like, and he was in really, when I listened to it, even after we talked, he was in character like the whole album basically. And how, at least on the Pharrell stuff, he's in character. The only one he's not probably in character on is Brambleton, the one about him actually hustling with dude and everything. But everything else, he's like in that, like, he's taking who he already is, like that, kind of, again, the cocky hustler mentality, right? Which looks different all across the country, but everyone knows what it is, right?
Yeah.
But it gets deep into the mode of that. Whereas on the Ye joints, it's more broader, right? Like it's not as menacing, which I think is just an interesting, again, form of art to create. One quick interesting thing, the song Let the Smokers Shine the Coops, which again is, I think, a very specific element of like late 80s, early 90s, like street culture, right?
Absolutely.
Like, you know what I mean? And again, like you said, it is what it is, but it's also very relevant to a time and a behavior, right? That was their version of Glaciers of Ice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I hear that.
And so just, again, looking at owing to the influences, because so you figure he's an artist that wears the obvious influences of Big, Raekwon. You know what I mean? Like he wears the influences of the stuff that was the transformational music of his time, right? Which I think is interesting, because now in hip hop we're getting to a place where you could have a 45-year-old artist that could still have been impacted by albums that came out 27 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
25 years ago. So I think that the art itself is at a different place, and we have to judge the art based on, I think, the multiple kind of spaces that not only the art, but like Black people are in, which I think will lead to talking about Kendrick. But like, you just can't judge it like, is he better than him anymore? Like, I guess we're just to me, we're just past that time. Like, you have to say, like when we listen to jazz, right? I don't compare Sun Ra to John Coltrane.
Right.
Right. I don't compare like Ron Carter to you know what I mean? Like you could kind of compare different people who play particular instruments, but and really you have to set that out. Like who did this music really well?
Right.
Who did soul jazz really well? Like who did the classics really well? Like you just can't start comparing people to people. And I do think hip hop as an art form is getting to a place where you got to start putting stuff in its own boxes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any idea of like this artist and being like this artist is better or worse than this artist just won't serve you because the music is at a fundamentally different place.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point because you definitely don't. I don't know how it doesn't serve you very well trying to compare it, and there's so many touch points that it's to me it's more useful to just enjoy it, within its space, and does it get to a certain tier of creation almost? You know what I mean? Like there's jazz records that are like, oh, this is like, oh, this is a nice record you can listen to. And there's records that like maybe challenge you, you know what I mean, in a certain way. I'm, actually I guess I'm starting to pivot to bring up some of this Kendrick stuff. I like a good challenging hip hop song that like makes you have to think about something. You know what I mean? And even with what is compelling about Pusha's record is that a couple of songs make you gotta kind of engage with that moment, and you know what I mean, and with that character. Doesn't a pivot. This is talking about the Kendrick record. The the thing I like about Kendrick Lamar is, I mean, he can rap. I mean, that's the first part. You know what I mean, and he does do things with the music that they make that like it is there actually are each are different unique albums. Like they're not all the same like formula almost. And this particular record, I mean, my overwhelming thought about it is that it is a mix of dealing with your kind of your personal, not just trauma, but like failings and self-development, and then also community challenges, trauma and development, like in places, and which I could understand where somebody might be like, I don't want to listen to that right now. I don't want to think about that right now. Because the tone, some of the songs are not. I mean, even the way the album starts with the like, I don't know, that I guess like choral singing. You know what I'm saying? I hope you find like, that, doing the musical.
Right.
And I was listening to some of it. It was almost like chamber music or something. Like some of the beats is like a piano, like, you know what I'm saying? And this dude's rapping, which is like, that's kind of some wild stuff. Like it's not boom bap, right? Like, so if somebody was like, oh, that's like the new backpack rap. It's not backpack rap because ain't no boom to the bap in that. That ain't no boom bap record.
Right, ain't no boom.
Like,
it might be a bat, but ain't no boom in it.
Yeah, man. Like this is a different thing. And I think that it takes a confidence of artists to make something. It was all. I mean, when we was back in the days when we was involved in the music creation, sort of the whole concept of like there was a formula that was exiting like the rigor or the challenging hip hop, and then it was like and then I guess we even touched on it. We brought up about Doom. They're like, well, Doom sort of did what folks was doing, but he did it in a way that we thought was still authentic, with his looping popular R&B songs that and then rapping over them, right? Like, and so I don't even I know it's like I know, like, I guess like drill. Would that be considered the dominant sound of hip hop right now, or the most popular, like that?
I mean, kind of, but drill is interesting. I mean, there will be people who write books on this kind of shit later, because it's like it's a sound, but it's an energy. But then it's it's obviously started with Dirk and Chief Keef and King Louie and the whole Chicago sound, and then went to like New York had its own version of it. Then London created their own version. So it's like all these different versions that are morphing. And then at the same time, I guess this might be for another conversation, there's this like Detroit sound that has
Yeah.
permeated the music, which is like ESTG, Babyface Ray, Icewear Vezo, like the kind of people who are now moving the current sound, 42 Doug, right? Like they're kind of moving the current sound where drill has almost become like commercial gangster hip hop, if that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then like the Detroit sound is like the sound of what people are like riding around in their cars listening to. So it's an interesting. I mean, you know, you just mentioned me earlier. So a couple things about Kendrick. I am in the space of the person that's kind of like, oh man, this is a little complicated, man. Like this is a bit much, man. You know what I mean? Like, and not a bit much because I don't think he is doing what he's doing well. Because I want to be clear, I think he may be the preeminent artist in hip hop of the last 7 to 10 years. To your point, he's made albums that none of them are the same. If you really think about like, there is no most hip hop artist who's made albums that like none of them were the same album. Like you could argue Blueprint 1 and Blueprint 2 sounded pretty much alike, right? You know, Blueprint 3 didn't because it was 7 years later. But, you know, even Jay has made albums that like, if you listen to them after a certain point, they sounded similar.
Yeah, yeah.
He hasn't. Like, I mean, he made an album of outtakes and sold it to you, and like you listen to it, right? Like jazz outtakes, you know, like being with Terrence Martin and Kamasi Washington and just the artists behind it. I think he's created a set of music. The closest person, frankly, in a hip hop context, I can compare it to kind of is Marvin Gaye or Stevie Wonder in the sense that like you're making opuses and they don't sound like each other.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like The Secret Life of Plants to Hotter Than July.
Right.
I know we should probably just have one called The Secret Life of Plants so we can just go through every song so people can like appreciate it. But like,
absolutely.
But you know what I'm saying? Like those albums don't Talking Book and you know, what's this album where she knocks me off my feet? Like they don't sound like each other. Marvin Gaye doing Here My Dear and that, you know, that time, like it doesn't sound like anything else. Then we did Sexual Healing doesn't sound like Hear My Dear at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's how I feel like Kendrick is. Like he's making hip hop albums that don't sound like the stuff he did before. And I think it's jarring for a audience who is used to the like right now, because I think he kind of with this album departed from the right now.
Yeah.
I think this is the first album that and it makes sense as his last album on TDE in that sense. Yeah, but his send-off album, like I said, even kind of real Marvin Gaye-ish, your send-off album is like kind of different, right? Like you created hits. And like your send-off album has nothing to do with this, you know, like we talked about, there's no loyalty, there's no King Kunta, right? There's no, you know, swimming pools, right? Like there's no all right. There's no, I mean, you know, there's some good songs.
But they're
there's
not
none
those
of that
kind of
thing.
songs.
They're
I mean,
just
even
not those kind of songs.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I'm just scrolling through, looking at the play counts for the songs, like currently, which is sort of amazing that, I mean, a song, a record, I think this was 2 weeks ago that this came out, 3 weeks, that something has been played 61 million times seems
right.
I mean, I guess we're on planet Earth and there's a lot of people, but it seems like, wow, 61 million. That's a lot of record. That's a lot of record playing. But just within, and it's the thing I appreciate that he does is they build an album, and usually at the end of the album is a song that like is usually a strong song, but also like usually has some sort of challenge to it. You know what I mean? Like you know, let me look back real quick. Actually, let me go. I can do this fast. I do this, and then we'll go like this. All right, there we go, Justice. Now you're moving quickly. You know, Damn ended with Duckworth, the John, about his pops and Top
I was
Dog.
pops met Top Dog and all them.
Yeah, like, what I mean, the Pimp a Butterfly ends with the joint, the Mortal Man, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where's the other one here? I can't do the high pitch do, you know what I'm saying? Where is it?
Word to West Side. That's more like RZA, but I forget what the other. I forget what the
Good Kid, Mad City, ending with Compton and Real, but Compton, more like, with Dre, and then Section 80 was first. Yeah, Good Kid, yeah. Section 80 is High Power. That's the one with that's wow, that's a long time ago.
Right. See,
but the theme is like, and even if you look at the cover, it's like clearly, like, I think he's emblematic, and the songs on this record is like, I am not the person, I am still the person I am, but I am not the person I was maybe when I started rapping. Right? Like, I done went through some arc of stuff. I mean, even I think to a degree, which makes it interesting as a record, that there's stuff in here where like he's trying to speak to, through the art, things I've heard him criticized about. You know what I'm saying? Like, a couple different podcasts I listened to, but years ago I can't remember that they were on Gimlet for a while. The Nod was Brittany Luce, and that podcast that was like had made way back. I think the Pimp a Butterfly came out when I was listening to their podcast and being like, I like Kendrick and I like what he's saying, but as a woman, sometimes there's certain stuff where it's like, damn, like, why couldn't you said that like just a little different, so I wouldn't have to feel like I'm like having to detach from it, because I think I feel what you're saying, but I'm also a little bit like, damn, like could you say that with different word? Could that have been done slightly different, right? And like about These Walls Could Talk, I think what you're talking about, which, on one hand you can look at through the perspective of like, like the woman in that song is, living her life as she wants to live it, but it's been like sort of also framed within like, kind of his dynamic with the father of her child, and, the streets and all this other shit, right? You know what I mean? Or Complexion also was one that like was sort of like, oh, it's kind of dope talking about women, but it was kind of like, I don't know totally if you got there, right? Which, to me is, if you in creation and doing something creative, if you're trying to push to a direction, right, and I can at least get the sense that you weren't maybe I don't think you were being malicious, like you were trying to talk about this thing in the way that you understood. I ain't saying nobody got to like it, but I'm not going to be like, we got to get rid of you. I mean, like, I know folks had criticism about him having Kodiak Black on this record. Now, I don't know Kodiak Black's music super law like that. I just know, he's had some less than favorable things to say about Black women a couple times, particularly around their attractiveness or whatever have you. But I don't, but also I do the thing where it's like, I don't know enough to just be like, so quote unquote, someone is quote unquote canceled. You know what I'm saying? Like,
here's the thing, man. Your cousin did some shit, man. Like, your cousin comes over and he did some shit. The question starts to be, do you not talk to your cousin because somebody that you at work with doesn't like something your cousin said?
Right.
And even if you find something that your cousin said a little off, right? What is the way that you work with your cousin to help them understand that maybe, man, you can't say that to people when they're outside? You can't say that to women, man. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you can't say that. Like, yo, come on, dog. I get what you're trying, but you can't say that. And so the idea, and I think it's where we get at artists, and I think we've gotten to this weird place where, and we've talked about this before, like, we just expect so much out of artists because with the lack of, and I'm not saying lack of leadership, but there are a lot of grassroots, and not just grassroots, because sometimes we, going back to the Panthers in different times, we like overemphasize the quote unquote lumpen proletariat, or this idea of who's a grassroots leader. And I think there's some real air quotes around that sometimes. Around who's a grassroots leader and who identifies who is a grassroots leader. And that's a whole different conversation. Leaders have followers, but
right.
You know, like for real, like leaders are not just the best person that spoke on a subject.
Right.
They have people that they actually lead to a place, but that you know, but in the absence of maybe what people perceive as a broader sense of national folks that do that, we look at the artists and we're led by these artists, and we've done this before, but like I don't know, when Gamble and Huff and folks were doing stuff, they were the soundtrack to something, but there were other people fighting for things. Like you didn't look at the responsibility, accountability for Gamble and Huff and the OJs could do for the love of money, but they could also do a song about love and talk about taking somebody's woman.
We
and like,
cried
you know
together.
what I mean? Yeah, like they weren't responsible. We've made these artists responsible because they pop up with good ideas from time to time.
Right.
And then we criticize them in the same way. So I think to your point, just to add on, he said things of where he was at.
Right. And
right, like that's where he was. You know what I mean? And he may not have been at a place where you wanted him to be, but guess what? That's assuming that the place you're at is the place that we should be.
Right.
And again, now obviously things that are harmful. I'm not supporting or anything that's harmful to people, but like there's a lot of latent assumptions when we like, how do we look at an artist and like where they were, and then him debating or changing his place, like changing his location on subjects which we would expect a person that's intellectually curious to actually change their position.
Right. And to move through.
And to move. Yeah. Not to be in the same position they were 13 years ago.
Yeah. And the thing I thought was, like I said, I was processing it, and I think it ties actually back to the Pusha T record too, is we as a community, we have not necessarily most of our lives have not had the privilege to be able to be like, this person who we find despicable is like excommunicated from the world, like they're gone. So i.e., somebody in the neighborhood shot somebody else in the neighborhood, there's a good chance one of them is still going to be around the neighborhood, and y'all just going to have to figure out how to manage that, right? Or something happened, something terrible happened down the street, or it don't even got to be fully terrible. Somebody stole out of somebody's car. You got a pretty good idea that it was what's the name's cousin that came through because you seen him. You don't see him for a few months. They pop up. Now, some people might be like, I'm not going to say their name because it's not my story to tell, but I was remarking with my mom, and the gentleman had stole the plants from a family friend's house. And this particular gentleman is well known for this sort of activity. They saw him with the cart going down the street. They went and got him, made him go back to all the houses he took and sold them plants to get them back and put the plants back in his yard. And, he did that via the means, whatever way you think one would tell somebody, hey, another grown man, you're going to get them plants, you're going to put them back in my yard, right? They solved that, right? But
that's an understatement. They solved it.
They solved that, right?
That's good.
But like those dynamics, right, are things that we know come out of, because again, police, ain't nobody else going to deal with that. That's a person that me and you going to deal with that, right? And we come from time spaces where, I don't like what you did. I also don't have the space to like remove you from the planet, so to speak. At least I don't want to have to. So fix it. And then, I ain't gonna let you really kick it with me no more, but you can still live it. You still gonna be around here. I'm gonna be around here. Neither one of us is going nowhere. We just ain't gonna treat each other like that. And we get into this conversation, and I think it's a really interesting one, particularly when it comes to like black men and the way people engage with black men. And that's why I think this is important, because like the way you can talk about like not engaging with someone that, especially when it comes to creative people, because it's like the very true reality is, if you heard some artists, whether it be music or movies or whatever, said or did something you don't like, the bar or threshold to no longer really engage with them is pretty low. You can kind of just stop listening to or stop watching whatever they was doing. Right now, depending on other things you do, if you are a super Twitter person and people keep talking about that person, or at least the people you follow on Twitter talk about that person, then it might be hard for you to stop having to hear about that person, right? But then also you could just get off the damn Twitter, right? Like you could just let me put the app down, right? Like so sometimes we forget these things, but it's a very low bar of disengagement. It's a different thing if that person is in your family, or that person is within your social sphere, or that person is in your city in some way, and you got to figure out how to deal with them, right? Like you have to navigate this space, and the like listening to the record, and even like in one, I mean, I don't know, again, I don't know a lot of Kodiak Black verses, but like the song they talking about, they, kind of, I dug what they was talking about. You know what I'm saying? And then when you get to, and I think it's kind of the one of the songs that I think is maybe the most poignant to me was two, The Mother I Sober with Beth Gibson from Portishead, and like sexual trauma and trauma within families and general, like that's, I mean, that's world class justice. Like, if you may not want to listen to that today, if you ain't ready to grapple with some challenging thoughts about what the hell goes on in our families and people's community and our general, as a society in America, our inability to actually deal with that whole world in a constructive way. If just as a tip, there's a clip of Marlon Wayans on, I think, Sway's show or one of them radio shows, and there's a staff member on the show who figured out that they, through the genetic John, that they distant, cousins. And Marlon Wayne goes, "Oh, you from the other side of the rape." You know what I'm saying? Like, and he said it like in a jovial way, but it was like, "Yo, you from the other side of the rape." Like how do you know what I mean? Which, is the subtext that you don't really want, nobody really wants to bring up. Like, people want to assume that like at some point in the past they're like, he left his wife to go be with the with the African. Like, no, there was a rape. There was a unwanted, event that occurred, and that's why we're related. And I'm gonna go over here and still get a burger or a veggie burger, for my brothers that don't eat that, off the grill here at the you invited me to the super duper generational cookout. But also we can't forget that if we're related, if we're connected, in terms of Black people too, we, like, you talk about slave, like there's a traumatic, painful reality as to why we're together. And we are going to be together because there ain't no other planets, right? At least not yet. We ain't got no spaceships. So we all gonna be here. You know what I mean? And to bring that up and to create the structure to talk about that. And then the closing song, Mirror, like that opens up with, Kodak Black say, "I choose me." Right. And the reality of someone, healing and getting well, there's an aspect where you have to choose yourself and understand that it's okay to make decisions that keep you well, that sometimes say, "I can't come over there and be with y'all today. No, you can't borrow my whatever. Actually, I need a couple days to not talk to y'all. I love y'all, but I need a week off. Like, y'all got, whatever crisis is happening over there with y'all this week. I ain't coming over to be a part of that." You know what I'm saying? And it's a tenuous concept sometimes, especially I would imagine, for folks that become wildly successful, that there's this expectation that everyone connected to them should have access to whatever wealth or perceived wealth that they've gathered, right? And then that would then, fix or solve or make their lives all better. But the reality is, it's probably not never enough money. And it's probably a whole lot more people, depending on what your family dynamics look like, that could pop out the woodwork that some would assume you are supposed to help. You know what I'm saying? And then, and I'm gonna do a justice jump. When you look at when folks are serving in our communities in whatever capacity, whether as public, officials, as, community leaders and activists, community organizers, or as like the unofficial mayor of your area, people put a trust in them, and then sometimes put a wildly unfair burden on those individuals, and individuals can't always keep it up, right? And there's a point where they go, "Yeah, man, I'm not solving that one. Y'all got that one. I'm out. Like, I'm gonna go sit down on my stoop and take a break. Like, I can't do all of this." You know what I'm saying?
Well, just to add on, man, you touched. You're a smart guy. You know that.
I try. do my best.
Yeah, man, you're a smart guy. No, I think you made the jump, and it's a good jump because I do think in some ways Kendrick's not here to make us all happy, and I think there's a place in Black art where, as humans, we recognize that we're not at a place to make everyone happy according to the kind of parameters of the kind of hip hop you're selling. And once you've done your segmentation to identify who your fans are, right? And you're like, okay, your fans want to hear you be with these producers, or your artists, your fans want to hear you do this kind of song, or they want to see you in this performance venue. And I think in some ways, both of these albums are kind of a repudiation of the segmentation in some ways, because it's like, hey, I do this. This is it. Or I'm doing this and I don't listen. I'm doing an album that all y'all just try to go sell it. Try to go stream it. Because it ain't some shit to sell itself. Like, the terminology, good dope sells itself. Well, this might be good record, but it don't sell itself because it requires a breaking of the segmentation. It requires the artist that everyone that won a Pulitzer Prize doing a song with Kodak Black, right? Which is like very few people who listen to Kendrick as far as that kind of space, frankly, or in the segmentation, you think like or respect or want to hear him with Kodak Black. But as an artist in the specific space that Kodak Black exists, Kodak Black is known and respected as that kind of rapper. Like, you can take it or leave it, but it don't mean that everybody down south and across the country don't like Kodak Black. So that's one thing. The other leap you're making is, again, going back to this responsibility of an artist in the time where people are looking for an artist to bear the broader challenges of our society and wear them and then report on them and then be the paragon, right? So not only to report on them the way you want him to or her to, be the person you want them to, but to carry it the way you want them to, and then for them personally to be the way, versus him talking about the issues with his his wife and his partner, right? Like, he's repudiating these things, which I think are frankly healthy for the music and frankly healthy for breaking up this idea of what we think how this is supposed to look, sound, and be. And I think, we often talk about, post-slavery traumatic disorder, right? And the things that have flown from that. But there's also, and I think he makes a great point with some of this stuff, the trauma that flows through our communities currently that's passed off as different stuff. Like, when people have trauma that's passed off, that's how he is. That's how your uncle is. That's how your aunt is. She always curse people out, curse people out, throw a bottle at them. Like, no, dog. Like, that's not okay that she got drunk and threw the bottle at you. It's like, it's not okay. Or that side of the family, you know how they are. Right? We always got that. Like, how that side of the family get down.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So now it's a family trait. Right? The trauma that's over there is a family trait.
Yeah.
And then, the final saw, this one, just like classic quote that finally, when you have when a community has something, we pass it off as culture.
Yeah.
And then it made me think about how everyone talk about they do this for the culture. And, I've always been stupefied as to what the hell the culture is, right? Because I don't know if it's black people, is it black and brown people, is it people in the ghetto, is it people that buy hip hop? Like, who the hell is the culture? Is it white allies that's cool because they buy the music? Like,
right?
They gonna wear dashiki or a native headdress. Like, what the hell? Who the hell is the culture? And how do we know who they are? But the deeper thing is how you have this trauma, and we see it, frankly, with the killings. We have this trauma in America that's passed off as culture. We have this trauma about how people use weapons and mental illness and white supremacy and a whole host of other things. It's just really now we just commonly accept it as American. Yeah. Like, because we're just like, oh, this is what happens in America.
Yeah. This is just, it's just a thing you got to deal with. Can't avoid it. It's like, we can't? Are you sure?
Right. You sure we can't avoid this? Because we got some neighbors to the north. Here's a funny thing: they got TVs like us, and you know,
they like our quote unquote violent music.
yeah,
too,
like
and
what's
they
going on
don't.
with Superman? Like, but guess what? They don't have that. So we don't. You know, you could ostensibly move to Toronto and get everything you get here. The bottles will be smaller, and it'll be interesting name and
It'd be a
company.
metric. It'd be in the metric
Yeah, it'd be
system.
a metric version. but like, but you don't get people running in Manitoba. You don't get people running through Manitoba killing 14 people. So it's not, but we have accepted the collective trauma and written it into the DNA of it. So I say that to bring it back down that I think he is tapping upon something to produce a project that is representative of him as an artist, but also I think the space and time where we're at, where it's like arguably one of the most popular artists in the most popular music in the world has created, and I'm not going so far as to say it's an anti-album, but it's definitely like this guy. This is when you expect him to come out. You expect him to drop. It's like Drake. Or you expect him to drop. It's like Jay-Z. Like, you know what I mean? There's only certain artists that when you hear this person's coming out, your expectation of what it means. And I argue beautifully so. He subverted the expectations.
Absolutely. I mean,
of what it meant to put this record out.
Yeah, he definitely. I mean, there's just the way these things work. There's a pretty good. It was years ago now, but I think it was Planet Money, like Song of the Summer, and like that concept, like a song that becomes super popular in a summer, and it's like a real market phenomenon, right? And but like no one knows usually what the song of the summer is going to be till it becomes the song of the summer, right? So that becomes like no matter where you're at, all genres, it kind of becomes a song that people listening to. I don't know if any of these songs will become those songs, but the expectation may have been, especially for artists at his level, would be you need to make a song of the summer song and put it on the record, like in a very the way when we was making music, somebody would be like, and what song? What's your radio hit? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if there's a radio hit on here that is intended to be that. I mean, there's probably a couple songs that, I mean, actually, I would say at least it looks like if there was one, I would say it'd be maybe Die Hard could do that. But even that song is like, I hope it's not too late to set my demons straight. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that being the chorus of the song, like where some people would be like, I don't want to think about out there, like my demons. You mean me? You mean I have imperfections that I have to make up for? Right. I live in America I don't know if you watched got through to or watched ATL, but in there's a scene of Liam Neeson as a character is playing himself in the bar with Paperboy, and he says wild stuff on the way out, and Paperboy's like, hey man, don't you know you ain't supposed to say stuff like that? And he's like, hey man, one of the things about me and white man's like, I don't have to learn, I don't have to learn anything. I don't have to learn from my mistakes. I just keep making them. I just keep going. So he's like, which is like a very like, oh yeah, that's how we get down. And it's gonna like, my inner challenges, me. I did something wrong. Nah, moving on. Like, next subject, next question. You know what I'm saying? Like, and we've had, I mean, I guess in a jovial sense, if you monitor at all college football and man, was his
Nick Saban
trying to bang on Jimbo Fisher being like, man, if you don't cut it out, like,
right,
the nerve.
But then to be like the demons, right? Him being like the demons that lurk demons that lurk underneath your recruiting, like,
like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so we have a society that in many ways is not here for repent or reverence. It's just like, nah, like, you just move on. And so for an artist at his level to put something out with that type of energy, I appreciate it. And there's also the reality that probably at his level he can stand it if it ain't as popular or doesn't go wherever, I don't know how done it. I mean, it's not like he ain't gonna go on tour somewhere. If somebody want, Kendrick can still book a tour because people are gonna go to the Kendrick show. You know what I'm saying? Like that's gonna happen. Yeah, but I thought, and I
said, real quick, as an aside, just thought about it. Jimbo Fisher doing that to Nick Saban was like the hip hop equivalent of like when Jay-Z was like, and you know who? Did you know what? But you know who? But let's keep that between me and you. Like, like that is the version of like you know what I mean? Like yo, what are you saying? Like Jimbo Fisher, like, yeah, just look underneath. Yeah, just keep checking under the cover.
Yeah, check
like, whoa. Like, don't do that, Nick. Don't do that. Like,
don't go there, man. Don't go there, Nick. Come on, man. Like, America, United States. So,
America.
I guess we'll say it close it. I would recommend listening to both records. You know, finding your way through if you are a hip hop listener tour or whatever. You know, and then like as all things, take the best part for yourself. You don't gotta like all of it. There's no requirement to like everything somebody makes.
Because all of it ain't, again, it's all art, right? And it's almost like going to a museum and you look at something and you could like it, or you could figure out that there's someone in the world that does like it, and you could recognize that too and be okay with it, right? Like, again, there's part of the art that has been like everyone has to like everything, which I think had led to a dilution of the kind of music broadly, so yeah.
All right. So with that, I'm gonna say I think we good. We call it a wrap.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother Majestic. We try to record regularly. You're getting a double dose today, so enjoy. We will be back in the coming weeks as well as some other things. You know what the deal is. If you want to support the podcast, share, rate, subscribe wherever you listen. Search us up on Patreon and you can become a patron. Also search and find the Etsy shop and buy a t-shirt or something and put some money, in the kitty, as it were. But please be safe out there. If you heading out with you somewhere today and you can hit up a cookout, man, please do and enjoy. And we'll be back very, very soon. So with that, I say peace.